All right, so just wrapped up my session at Resorts World. It was not the smoothest. It was actually pretty bad. Played for an hour and 49 minutes and busted for 1K, so 2.5 buy-ins. Yeah, I mean the first hand, you guys saw. I'm gonna do a recap. I got the money in good with the set, and then the guy made a low probability call but drilled the turn, and I paid him off. And then the second buy-in, I was actually doing okay, and then there's just one hand where the lady who just sat down, she showed like a massive bluff with ace high and somehow won the pot. Stone cold bluff that had no equity really. And then essentially there was a 3-bet on the button, and I probably should have just 4-bet ace king. I felt like this session, my biggest mistake was I was playing way too passive when it comes to hands that have fold equity as well as bigger hands. So I should have 4-bet and got her out of the pot. But then I just flat called the 3-bet, 4 callers. Flop is ace 2-5, rainbow, and then I check. She bets almost the pot. I call. Turn is another 5, and then I check. She shoves for 200 something. Pot is already massive. It's already like almost 400. So then I make the call, and then she shows that she turned the straight with 3-4 suited. And then I had just over 100 left. Flop 2 pair. I shouldn't have been in the hand. 7-9 offsuit from late position, and then someone rivered a straight on me. So yeah, basically switching casinos. I'm currently at the Wynn now. If my coach is still playing, I believe he's playing 2-5 right now, I'm gonna go shadow him and just watch how he plays. And then if I'm feeling better, I'm gonna try to play 1-3 here and hopefully just play better, right? In the 1-3 stakes, right, it's like, yeah, it sucks to lose a few thousand, but the more important thing is just, this is a battle for myself. I'm just trying to be a profitable grinder as like a personal journey. And yeah, I think for me, it's just getting hours in, making the right plays, and that's all that I care about. So in this hand, under the gun and under the gun +1 limp, I look down at pocket tens on the button and bump it up to $25. The big blind and both limpers decide to come along. 4 ways to the flop of 10, 7, 2 with the flush draw on board. Your boy just flopped top set, but unfortunately this board is pretty wet since there's an open-ended straight combination and also the flush draw on board. Out of nowhere, under the gun +1 decides to shove for $80, which is just under a pot size bet. I think and decide what to do here. I could just flat call, but given the wetness of this board texture, I actually just decided to bump it up to $200 just to isolate this guy. A quick side note, during my previous session at the Wynn, when I was absolutely on monkey tilt, I paid this guy off in 2 different spots. One when he had king high, which you saw in the vlog, and another spot where he took me to Value Town with top pair better kicker. Another reason why you shouldn't play Jack 4 suited. Everyone else folds, and the run out is Queen of Diamonds and 9 of Hearts. He shows Ace 10 offsuit for top on the flop, which is no good here as I show my set of 10s and we take this pot down. In this next hand, I get into a weird spot with the big slick, aka Ace King. Under the gun +1, who's actually now one of my poker friends, opens up to $11. There are 4 callers, and I look down at the big slick on the big blind. I bump it up to $110 just because there's so many callers. The original raiser calls, then it folds over to the button, who now jams for $162. This isn't a big enough raise to open back up the action, so I just flat call, as does the original raiser. The flop is no help as it comes Queen 5-2 rainbow, and this is the part of the hand where it gets kind of weird. So on this dry flop texture where I have nothing but ace high, I bet $60 and the under the gun +1 calls. The turn is at 8 of diamonds, and now I slow down and check. The under the gun +1 now bets $100, and I make the call. In hindsight, I could have found a fold here, but the pot is already like $600, so I have to call $100 to win $800, which is why I made the call. The river doesn't improve my hand as it's a 6 of hearts, and the action goes check check. The original raiser, who's in under the gun +1, shows pocket 9s, and the person who's all in shows pocket jacks. So the all in guy wins the main pot, and my now friend, fellow grinder, wins the side pot. In hindsight, I don't think I needed a 3-bet ace king in this hand, just because it's not a made hand, and after consulting with my coach Arrow, he told me he's not a big fan of 3-betting with non-made hands, especially out of position. I could have just called for $11 and lost the minimum, but instead I ended up losing $362. I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think I made the right play, or do you think I should have just called and lost the minimum? So here middle position opens at $12. The hijack who's a loose player calls, and so does the cutoff. I look down at ace jack offsuit in the big blind, so I decide to come along. Flop is pretty interesting. It comes 10-2-5 monotone board. Here I decide to check, and it checks around all the way to the hijack who fires for $15. Given I have the ace of spades, I decide to make the call and continue. The turn is a 4 of heart, which improves my hand to a gut shot straight draw, but I check again to see what the hijack does. Action checks around. The river is an 8 of diamond, which clearly doesn't improve my hand, so I'm just sitting here with, my whatever in my hand with ace high out of position. So given that no one seemed to show much strength in this hand, I figured if someone had a flush already, they would have raised on the flop bet. I decided to fire an overbet of $100. Now the loose hijack guy folds, and the cutoff goes into the tank for quite a bit. He says he doesn't believe me, but ends up folding, and we take this one down with the bluff. I like my line here because if anyone else had the flush, I feel like I would have known already, and clearly no one was strong enough to call down an overbet just because they probably would have needed like at least 2 pair or a set here. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments if this was the right play. So this is a hand that I wanted to include just because it's a mistake that I would have made before my coaching started with Arrow Poker. So in this hand, there's one limper, and I opened pocket nines to $15. The button to my left, who I believe is a 1-3 pro, 3-bets to $70. The big blind now cold calls a 3-bet, the limper gets out of the way, and I come along as well. Flop comes Jack 5-2 with 2 diamonds for the flush draw. It checks around, and the turn is a queen of hearts. The big blind now leads for $50. I get out of the way, and the original raiser now shoves over the top for around 500 more. The big blind snap calls, and the river bricks out. The big blind shows ace queen for top, and the person who 3-bet shows ace 5 suited for a 3-bet bluff. The reason I say that you don't need to do this type of play in the 1-3 streets is because you don't really need to polarize your range, since I feel like most people are just playing their hand in the board, and they're not really thinking about ranges and whether you're linear or polarized. I feel like this is probably more necessary if you move up in stakes and play against more difficult opponents. But sometimes I feel like in the 1-3 streets, if you play too fancy, you can actually end up owning yourself, like in this hand. Because after this hand, this guy like continued to lose and just left down. Probably when I saw him playing, he lost at least $600. And the thing is, in the 1-3 streets, let's say you are playing against a bunch of regs and sharks, it's better just to switch tables or not play that game versus trying to outplay them, since your edge mainly comes from playing against people you know you can beat, as opposed to outplaying like good players. I actually later talked to the guy in the big blind who was a nice guy from New York, I believe, and he told me he said that this guy made the exact same move on me one orbit earlier where he 3-bet me when I was opening from late position. So he had a hunch that this guy was 3-betting light. In this next hand, under the gun limps, who's the same guy who cold called the 3-bet and took the pot down against the grinder. Middle position now opens to $15, and I look down at 7-6 suited on the button and make the call. Both blinds make the call as well, and the undergun limper now makes it $35. For this price, no one gets out of the way. This bet feels like a pot sweetener, since if he really wanted to go heads up, he would have sized up to at least 4x, $60 or more, but he only made it $35, which is one of those things where it causes a chain reaction. If there's one caller, then everyone else kind of calls behind. So if you size up and the first person folds, then everyone else is more likely to fold, since there's less money in the pot. 5 ways to the flop of 996 rainbow. The small blind now leads for $35, and only I call with my pair of sixes. The turn is now a 7 of clubs, giving me 3 pair. Okay, I feel like the 3 pair thing is such a dumb joke, but you hear it every time, like at the table. But yeah, the small blind now continues for $100, which to me screams overpair or a 9. In this one, I just let it go because I just feel like people don't really bluff when it's multi-way. Like chances are someone has a monster, so I let it go and live to see another flop. In this next hand, I look down at the lucky ladies, aka pocket queens, in under the gun. I opened to $16 in the middle position, and hijack both call. Flop is lovely, just like the ladies. King, queen 2, rainbow. We flop middle set, and while there's a flush draw on board, I'm just not too worried about that, so I continuation bet for $20. This is clearly not enough to shake anyone off as both callers come along. Turn is a safe one, 8 of spades. Now that the pot is getting juicy, I decide to size up to $85 to really just get the maximum with my hand. To my surprise, middle position now jams on me with his remaining $171. Going absolutely nowhere with the second nuts, I make the call. The river is a 10 of diamonds and now putting it straight on the board if he had ace 10 for some reason, but he flips over king queen showing top 2. We take this one down with our set, and this is a classic 2-pair versus set situation, which is honestly why sometimes I don't like playing junk hands such as 8-5 suited, which used to be in my range before coaching. It's just dangerous since you can easily go against a set of 8s or set of 5s, and I feel like in this case, it was just a cooler or a setup hand since he had king queen, which is a very solid starting hand. But let's say he had like king 2 or queen 2, or even, king 8 or queen 8, then I feel like that's like a reason you don't really play those hands because, okay, you can hit 2-pair, but you might be up against a better 2-pair or a set. Okay, this next hand is why limping in 1-3 can be profitable. I know almost all poker training sites say never to limp, which I'm sure is applicable in online poker, but in 1-3 a lot of people want to see cheap flops with mediocre hands, so if you can flop the nuts multi-way, you can typically get paid off. This is exactly what happens is I look down at ace 2 suited under the gun. 4 other players end up limping as well, so we go 5 ways to the flop. We flop the stone cold nuts, so I decide to check as I'm first to act to just play a little more deceptive. It checks over to the button who bets $10. I now do the good old check raise, but only to $25 to keep this guy in. To my surprise, this guy raises my raise to $85. When you're sitting there with the nuts, this is when you try to implement your best acting skills. So I do a little bit of Hollywooding, I pretend like I'm disappointed, but ultimately make the call. The turn is on 9 of heart, not really changing much. So I just check over to my opponent and he bets again for an aggressive $150. I now go deep in the fake tank, a little more Hollywooding, kind of like leaning back, sighing, doing all that good stuff, acting 101 from my freshman year of college paid off. And then eventually I do go all in after my short Hollywood, not too long. I don't want to like hold up the table, but you gotta, throw a little bit of acting in there. He snap calls for 250 and shows that he also flopped, a flush, the second nuts, which in this case is no good. The river is an offsuit 5, and his queen high flush, queen 5 suited, is no good. Even though he did have a straight flush draw if the 9 of clubs came. But we're not too worried about that, and we take this nice pot down, flopping the nuts, and yet again coolering someone else. In this case, a limp pot bloated into an almost 1k pot, which shows the power of limping in 1-3 games, since people just want to see the flop, and they're going to play all sorts of hands. Had I went ahead and raised at $20, I probably would have folded out my opponent, and this hand never would have happened. In this next hand, I look down at the favorite hand of every old man coffee, pocket rockets. I'm under the gun, so I open at $15. The middle position calls, and so does the cutoff, who's a crazy French guy. Flop comes 2-3 jack with a flush draw on board. A continuation bet for $25, and both players come along. Turn is an offsuit 10, and now I size up to $85, which is just under a pot size bet. Only the crazy French guy in the cutoff comes along. The river is pretty safe, which is an offsuit 4, so now I fire the third barrel for $200. The French guy snap calls thinking he won the hand with his slow played pocket queens, but no sir, the ladies aren't so lucky in this hand as your boy got the goods, the pocket rockets, and take down this sizable pot. In this next hand, the French guy is under the gun with the straddle. Under the gun +1 calls. I look down at queen jack offsuit in the cutoff, so I go ahead and call. Button calls and small blind does as well. The straddler now makes it $20. And none of us are going away, so we all make the call. 5 ways of the flop of queen 6-10 with 2 hearts on board. It checks over to me and I bet $80, which is just under a pot size bet. Only the small blind calls. The turn's now at 9 of diamonds, and when the small blind checks over to me, I bet $120. The small blind calls again. The river is an offsuit 6, and it goes check check. The small blind shows king 7 suited for a missed flush draw, and we take this down. I'm not sure if I played this hand well or I just got lucky, just because I could have easily valued owned myself if this person had, king queen or ace queen or even a 2-pair, right? Just because this board is a bit wet and connected. So I'm not sure if I was just like going ham and I got lucky that this guy happened to be on a flush draw, but I didn't want to charge enough in case he was on the draw just because I felt like this was the type of player who was playing a lot of hands and would be sticky with a flush draw. So let me know what you guys think down below on this one. In this next hand, there's a limp from under the gun. Hijack makes it $12. I look down at 9-7 suited on the button, so I come along as well as the blinds. The flop comes Jack 8-5 with 2 spades and 1 heart. The hijack continues for $30, and given I have a gut shot as well as a backdoor flush draw, I make the call and so does the big blind. The turn's a 3 of diamonds, and when it checks to me, I actually go ahead and bet $110, hoping just to take the pot down. But the hijack, who is the original raiser, tanks for quite a while before making the call. The river is the one card in the deck I really want, which is the 10 of diamonds. So I pretty much hit a 4-outer, and when it checks over to me, I go ahead and go all in, putting max pressure on my opponent as I cover him, and he has around $200 or so. He now goes quite deep in the tank before making the fold. I could have actually probably bet less on the turn. I feel like when you're trying to rep a hand or like bet someone off in position, at least my logic is like, what's the minimum I can bet to get the person off? And I feel like a $110 bet was pretty aggressive, since if I missed the river and continued, there's a good chance he would have called me. I feel like he maybe had a pocket pair. Maybe he had like pocket nines or an overpair. However, I don't think an overpair or ace jack would check on the turn, so I would put him on like a middling pair, or maybe he had a set, but I think a set would snap call there. So yeah, I think he probably had like a middle pair and just decided to let it go. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this hand. All right, so the final hand of the session, the under the gun raises the $15, under the gun +1 and button call, and I go ahead and make the call with pocket sevens. Flop comes 3-5-4, 2 clubs, so the flush draws on board as well as a really connected board. I check, and the original raiser bets $35. With an overpair and a gut shot, I make the call. The turn is down 8 of hearts, and when I check over to the original raiser, he now bets $65. I go ahead and make the call, and the river's a 10 of spades. When I check, he now bets $115, and I feel like he probably is repping like an overpair, or at worst case, he's bluffing with a missed flush draw. But something I've learned from just my journey so far is people don't bluff that often in the 1-3 streets. If they triple barrel, they typically have the goods. So I just make the fold. I'm really not beating anything at this point. I'm essentially just bluff catching, and I'm happy with this play. I feel like before my coaching, I probably would have made this call at a very high frequency, but after the coaching, I typically make good folds when I'm not tilted. This is so degenerate. Just finished the session. It was around either 6 or 7 hours. Gotta look at the app. I need to go to sleep. It's already like 10 or 11 a.m. As you can see, bright daylight. But yeah, let's talk about the numbers in my car, since it was a good night, or a good morning, I guess. All right. Hot as shit in the car right now since it's Vegas. But yeah, basically I was in the game for 900 and then out of the game for 1835. So profit of $935. Almost broke even for the day. I was in the hole for $1,000 from the first session at Resorts World. And then I played a long session where I honestly thought this was the best session I've ever had, both from a decision-making standpoint, but also just from a mental standpoint, because I didn't let any hand really tilt me. And I was patient even when it was already like deep in the session, when I was deeper stack. I made a few moves. One of them didn't go through since I tried to do it on a calling station, but he actually almost folded. He like hit like a random ace on the river, I think. So yeah, just the wrong spot to fire the bluff. But overall, super stoked. Like I was on like a 2-session downswing. It doesn't seem like much, but I just feel like those losses are pretty big. So it's really good for the confidence and momentum to just get a big win. Shout out to my coach, Arrow. He's been super helpful in terms of just being there for me, answering all my questions, and really just showing me the ways of how to become a prop book grinder. So I think I'm still not profitable, but he made a good point. I used to be like negative $30 per hour. So anything that's not as bad as that is progress.
And yeah, that's gonna wrap up this vlog. And yeah, I need to get some sleep, but I'll see you guys in the next one.